the most important topics that has surfaced around identifying your key skill gaps and how to bridge them, especially when you are transitioning or trying to navigate the job market, right? So we are going to have a very informative and practical, insight oriented kind of a session because there's a lot of theoretical advice out there with regard to this topic. A lot of obviously industry specific advice as well as more generic advice that may be targeting overarching skill evolution that we are seeing from an AI perspective as well. So the goal is not going to be necessarily to get into any specific industry or any specific domain, although I may use certain examples throughout the conversation. But the focus will be much more on having a framework based approach to identify, regardless of what field you are in, the best skills, the top skills, the most in demand skills that you should be focusing on. How do you actually understand where you stand currently on those skills, meaning your strengths versus your gaps, right? And at the same time, what is the best way to then acquire those new skills or strengthen your existing skills? How do you identify the best platforms to be able to achieve that, right? So we're going to have a mixture of this discussion, that, and I call it a discussion because there are going to be Q&A. There's going to be a Q&A at the end as well, where you can ask me questions and I will answer for each specific scenario, background, situation that you might have. But at the same time, I will be showcasing certain frameworks that we have utilized now at Pivot with more than I would say more than about 10,000 professionals so far who have worked with us. And at the same time, there are going to be certain learnings which I would just verbally share with you as well, right? So yeah, that's what we are focusing on today: how to identify major skill gaps and bridge them, strengthen your existing skills to be able to land your target role and not get rejected for your top priority roles because of those gaps, right? All right. So first thing, I want to just kind of set up the topic a little bit before we dive into the exact you know advice or the frameworks that I'm referring to. So why even the need for this particular session, right? Why are we doing this session today? Because people have been upskilling for a while now, right? It's not a new topic necessarily, but the thing that's happening right now is the skill requirements from the industry, from the companies, from also other organizations that might be academia or non-profit oriented, almost across the board, we are seeing a much faster acceleration and evolution in terms of the skill requirements. So earlier, let's say every skill that you had used to be relevant for at least, let's say 5 years, 10 years, maybe even longer, right? Today, what's happening is a lot of the skills, not every single skill, but a lot of the skills are not relevant beyond 1 year, 2 years, sometimes a few months, if you're especially looking at certain technological skill set, right? So the speed of evolution, the speed of requirements changing from the company standpoint is getting faster. And that requires a new strategy to be able to constantly upgrade your skill set and making sure that you continue to retain or sort of really strengthen the timeless skills as well. It's not just about new skills, it's also about continuing to hone your timeless skills, which will come in handy across timelines, whether it's today or 10 years from today. So having a good understanding of where you need to evolve and upgrade, and where you need to retain the existing skill but just fine tune and hone it again, over and over. That is what the new requirement is in the upskilling ecosystem today. The other reason that we are doing this is because we have realized that a lot of the skills that people are acquiring today, they're not giving them fluency, they're giving them familiarity, right? So we want to strive not just for familiarity, but fluency. And it may not be necessary that you need to be fluent in every single skill that you bring to the table for your employer, but at least again the most in demand skills, the must have skills, you do need to showcase high level of fluency. And one of the reasons that's happening is because there has been a bombardment of online courses over the last 10 years, 15 years or so. You have obviously the Coursera's, Udemy's, and then you have more specialized platforms in India, outside of India, and US, Europe as well, right? So each of them have their own pros and cons, but they are all marketing their courses as the best course in the category, which is not true, right? Not every course can be the best course. So how do you evaluate course from the perspective of the ability that you will develop after taking that in your target, or what we call fluency, right? A lot of courses give you just the surface level knowledge. They give you a one size fit all project to work on, which is good if you're a beginner, and it helps you gain that new knowledge in a rapid manner, which is great. But it's not always enough to drive outcomes in your career, in your job for your employer. So you need to be able to differentiate when you are okay with taking a more introductory course for familiarity, and when you need to dive deep for fluency, right? So that's the second reason that we are doing this. um, Another reason that we need to do this today is because we have also seen that a lot of uh, you know skills that are being acquired are being done the- uh, through a course that is mostly theoretical. Yes, like I said, there could be a project, but generally that project does not always give you a deep dive into how things work in the real world. While we have seen best outcomes are achieved when people actually focus on practical project based learning as opposed to just theoretical learning. And when you're doing the projects, it needs to be customized, it needs to actually be relevant for the employers that you're targeting. If it is something that is a bit outdated, if it is something that is not aligned with the real world scenario, meaning it oversimplifies certain uh, key factors, or it does not really align with the new um, set of factors which should be taken into consideration, or let's say new AI models that are out there, then also it's not going to give you the right kind of skills at the end of the day. So you would have invested so much time and effort, but still not been able to actually solve the problem statement in the real world. So because there are so many courses being peddled out there every day, there you'll see number of marketing emails, videos being spread around for every single course. It's important to know that courses are not the panacea, the remedy for getting project based learning that you have to figure out on your own, no matter which field you are in. And if you're doing it on your own, doing it with an industry expert or somebody who understands that field directly, that can be a game changer too. So we'll talk more about that. So yeah, I think these are some of the key ways that, or key reasons that we are doing this. um, I would say, the people who this session is probably going to be most impactful for, um, are going to be people who are in the mid career levels typically. Some freshers might also find it helpful, but generally speaking, I think it would be more people with at least 5 years experience till 20-25 years experience who will find this session most relevant with regard to their upskilling requirements. So, with that said, let's dive into it. Let's get started and talk about the first topic, which is how do you identify the most in-demand skills you need for your target role, right? So, this is a very interesting topic, and just before we dive into how to actually do it, I think we just need to figure out why again this is becoming the need of the hour. So one of the things we have identified here is people are blindly following the herd a lot of time. They are going with, whatever others are kind of upskilling in. So it's not very personalized to you, and we need to make sure. that it any learning that we do is not just following a market trend, but it also incorporates our skills, where we stand today, where we want to be in the next few years, right? Because if it's not personalized, we will continue to just blindly follow the herd and find ourselves at a stage where we don't want to be in our career down the line. So, your first thing is identifying what are the most in demand skills for you, not just for everybody out there. So now I'm going to share my screen and start walking through certain frameworks that we have developed at Pivot to be able to achieve something like this. Allow me a second. Okay, great. I hope you all can see my screen. All right. So now this is our website Pivot, right? And you can access it through mypivot.work. And once you are signed up, you will see that on the home page, there is a there are these different features that you can utilize, right? And one of the key features that we have is this career planner, which is going to help you structure your entire transition journey into a stepwise process. So you can break it down rather than working on multiple things at the same time. For your transition from one role to another, you're working on one thing or maximum two things at a time. You optimize for those one or two things, and then you move on to the next step. And it covers all of the different factors that impact your job search or your career transition outcomes, right? So there are these 5 modules essentially within this planner. Each module has a specific purpose or a goal to be achieved. Again, completing each of these modules will help you further advance towards your target role. For example, Explore is all about getting clarity on the right fit role, industry, and positioning. Network is all about amplifying your reach, your visibility within the right companies to be able to get more opportunities, more referrals. And Learn is where we are going to spend majority of our time today, because Learn is what focuses on bridging any skill gaps and acquiring new skills, right? And then Prepare is more about job application optimization, meaning your resume, LinkedIn profile optimization, interview preparation, all of that. And Apply is where the rubber meets the road, meaning this is where now you're finally going to start applying to jobs and focus on converting those applications into interviews and offers. So we have already done 2 sessions previously on the Explore module, focusing on getting clarity on the target role in industry and positioning. And we have also done a session on networking, which focuses on, like I said, amplifying your visibility. So you can check out these 2 sessions on our YouTube page. It's going to be probably there in the top few videos, because we have just recently done this and gotten some good traction. But yes, let's dive into the Learn module. That's what we are focusing on today. So when you are here, you can click on Get Started. It will show you this video that helps you understand how this entire module works, but that you can do on your own time. The next step is the one that we want to focus on, because this is going to help us understand how to identify the most in demand skills, right? So as you can see, when you are on this page, it shows you certain skills that are recommended for your target role. So you might say, okay, how is this role coming here? Talent development manager role or digital marketing role. So these roles are coming here because when we were talking about the prior modules, right, the Explore and Network modules, there we have already selected our target role. So you might have to go through those first to select your target role. But let's say you already know your target role. So you can fill that out, right? You don't need to go through the entire set of those modules. You can just fill out in the first module which roles you want to target. And once you do that, and you then come to this page, which is again in Learn module, you will see that there are certain skills which are already recommended for that particular role, right? Um, these are based on our own proprietary models. We have looked into tens of thousands of different roles and what are the most in demand skills for each of those roles. So we've utilized certain open source data sources, and we are quite sure that you will get a very comprehensive list for each of these roles. But at the same time, we are focusing on the most in demand skills, not just any and every skill. So what you can do in addition to what you find here is, this is, by the way, something that a lot of people we have worked with have found extremely simple but extremely effective. And usually simplicity, drives effectiveness in my view. So this model is going to help you come up with the right skill requirements in a very simple and effective manner. So what's that? First, you will see the skills that are recommended over here through our proprietary model. Second, we want you to go to any job board. You can also go to Pivot's job board over here. When you click on job openings, you will see a job board. And once you are there, you will go through, let's say, 5 JDs of whichever role that you're targeting. Right now, obviously, we are looking at some random JDs over here. Let me just look at some marketing oriented roles, right? Let's say marketing manager role. Now, once we look at marketing manager role, we want to look at the skill requirements section, right? So this role is marketing manager for client strategy, and this one is a bit short of a JD. So let's go to some other JD where we have um, more in-depth requirements, like let's say this one, right? So here also you can see for each role they have defined what are the specific skill requirements. Now what you want to do is look at these requirements for at least 5 to 10 JDs. So look at 5 to 10 JDs of similar roles. They can't be of very different roles, right? So if you're looking at two separate target roles, like let's say one is generalist marketing manager and the other is performance marketing manager, let's say. So performance marketing manager is a very specific and granular kind of a role, while generalist is obviously more broad. So you can't compare these two, right? You can look at these two separately, but don't mix them together. So when I say look at 5 to 10 JDs of your target role, meaning look at one kind of role. So right now we are looking at, let's say, marketing manager, right? And you want to look at, let's say, marketing manager role, digital marketing manager, and similar ones like this one, right? You'll see for each of them there are certain requirements that they have shared in terms of the skill requirements. So here, for example, they have mentioned this role requires a deep understanding of priority customer segments, including pharma organization, academic institutions, healthcare professionals, with a strong focus on persona development, account insights, and targeted engagement strategy. This gives you the high level, but below this, they've given you even more details, right? Lead the execution for ABM, strategy, go to market objectives, leverage channels such as email, etc., etc. Now, what you want to do here is when you're looking at these different types of skill requirements for each of these roles, you want to look at the ones which are considered most important or most in demand skills. So sometimes companies will highlight right away what is the most important thing for that role. So you can see they've mentioned drive brand awareness, customer engagement, revenue growth for our digital medical platforms and pharma partners. Deep understanding of these things. So clearly, this role, while it requires many other things they have probably mentioned here, right? But at a high level, the most in demand skills for this role are these: brand awareness, customer engagement, revenue growth. And from an industry perspective, this one is particularly focused on pharma. But that is not a, that's not a skill, that's more of a industry expertise. So you can take that into account as well if you'd like. But this is likely not the most important thing here. The most important thing is these things, right? So what you want to do is note down somewhere that these are the most in demand skills, most important skills, must have skills that are needed for this role, right? And then you do the same exercise for 5 to 10 JDs. So you've made a list of the most in demand and must have skills. That's the first type of skills that you're looking for. The second type of skills that you're looking for are the most frequently asked for skills. So what does that mean? That means when you're looking at the 5 to 10 JDs, first we were looking at, okay, which ones are the ones which are highlighted as the most important skills, right? Second is you're looking at skills which are not necessarily highlighted as the most important skills, but you see them across majority of the JDs that you're looking at, right? So that means it could be potentially three or four skills which come again and again, or which show up again and again across different JDs. Typically, we see, like, if you're looking at 5 to 6 JDs, you'll likely see maximum three or four, technical or subject matter skills, and maximum three or four more soft skills or behavioral skills, right? um, for example, here there are these requirements that are shared, so you'll see that many of these are going to feature in the other JDs as well, right? So you want to make sure that you are putting this as the additional list, right? So we want to be able to provide both types of skills requirements in our exercise that we are doing over here. Let's go back to the career planner, and in the skill gap exercise over here, actually let me just, yeah, over here. So yes, so we are going to enter these skills over here, the ones that we have identified, right, for each of the roles that we have shortlisted. So based on the job description analysis, we'll identify the in-demand skills as well as the most frequently asked for skills. Some of these might already align with what we have shared here. Actually, there's a good chance they will align. So you don't have to obviously repeat them. Just enter the ones which you have additionally identified. And that helps you get a full picture of what kind of skills are being required for your target role, right? And the other thing to keep in mind here is you want to focus more on subject matter or technical skills for the role as opposed to the behavioral skills, because generally speaking, behavioral skills become much more important when you are at a mid to senior kind of a level where you are leading teams or doing a lot of cross-functional collaboration. You have direct interaction with a lot of clients, and I'm not saying that diminish the importance of those type of skills. They are equally important, but generally when companies are making hiring decisions, not promotion decisions and appraisal and pay decisions, when they're making hiring decisions, there is slightly heavier weightage on the subject matter expertise, the kind of achievements that you have from a technical perspective in that field that you are in, right? So that's why we are not going to ignore the behavioral skills, but we'll put a slightly heavier weightage on the subject matter skills. And that's why I would generally recommend, like, if you're looking at the number of skills, typically we see somewhere between 6 to 8 as the range of skills we target, out of which maybe two-thirds or about 75% would be subject matter skills, and the remainder would be your behavioral or people oriented and soft skills. So this helps us get a good understanding of what are the skill requirements. The next thing what we are going to do, we're going to enter our existing skills here. Right now, this is something that people have to do on their own, because the only other way is you are going to take some sort of a skill assessment, which you can. I mean, if you want to do it in a very in-depth manner, there are certain skill assessment platforms where you can take tests to identify how strong you are in the skills, right? But let's say if you're talking about your talent development profile, which we looked at on the prior page as well, you want to be able to basically make sure that you are covering all of your skills, again the subject matter and the behavioral skills here, right? So you can enter these skills over here. Some of these skills are already shown because there is another exercise in the first module, explore, where we were asked to fill out our existing skills, right? So that's why these are already shown. But when you are here, you can enter whatever skills you have by clicking here. And generally speaking, you are going to have to leverage not assessments, right? Because assessments take time, and not everybody wants to spend that kind of time taking an assessment for each and every skill to rate themselves. Rather, you need to look into three types of factors to determine whether you are strong, intermediate, or let's say beginner level. So strong is basically you're very fluent. Intermediate means you have good experience, but you might not be in the top, let's say 30%, 40% of that particular talent pool. And beginner is obviously you are in the, let's say, bottom 30% of the talent pool. So how do you generally identify this? You want to be able to look into three types of things. Number one, where have you spent majority of your time in your past 5 years of your career? Could be past 10 years also if you have longer experience. We work with a lot of people with 15, 20 years experience as well, so you can look at the entire work history if you'd like. But generally your last 5 years will tell you where you have made the most impact, where you have spent most of your time, right? So first thing is that look at where you have spent most of your time in the last 5 years. What kind of skills have you applied in the last 5 years? And try to identify the top three or four skills based on how much time you've spent. But this is actually the least accurate way, to be honest, to determine the strength of your skill. And the reason is, see, you might have spent a lot of time, but if you have not been able to achieve the right outcomes, right? If you've not been able to get the achievement of goals that your company has set for yourself, for you and your team, then you're going to not necessarily be very strong at this, right? So that's why the second and the third points that I'm going to make here are much more critical to assess your current skill fluency. So the second thing is looking at specific projects that you have worked on and the type of impact that you personally, or if you're leading a team, then your team personally has created those outcomes, or driven those outcomes. Now you have to look at those outcomes in a very objective manner, because if you miss the goal, then you have to not put it as a very strong skill. If you have achieved the goal or overachieved the goal, then definitely you can put it as a strong skill. And if you worked on multiple projects, then look at the most recent ones and see, was there a pattern where you overachieved in the last, let's say, 1 or 2 years of working on those projects, right? um, that's the second way of identifying whether you're good at something. The third way of identifying is the kind of feedback that you have received from your colleagues, your manager, your clients, etc. Right? So people will share their thoughts directly or indirectly. I know there are a lot of bosses who are not, or managers who are not very good at vocalizing positive feedback. They're very good at vocalizing constructive feedback, but not positive feedback. But even then, even if you have such a manager, or if you have such a team which is not very vocal about their you know positive feedback, they only give you constructive feedback, it can happen. We hear such situations all the time. In that case, you still want to kind of read into the indirect cues. The indirect cues, like for example, let's say every time you make a mistake, they give you a constructive feedback. But on certain projects recently, you have received no constructive feedback, and the project was delivered as is to your client, right? That is something that you can take as indirect positive feedback, right? Because they did not change anything. Your work was accepted as is, and it was delivered, right? So think about both the direct and indirect feedback that you get from people around you, right? Obviously, a lot of direct feedback would tell you exactly which areas you're strong in. It wouldn't just be, like good work, because good work and general feedback can be very, very broad, and it won't give you insight into what kind of skills you are actually strong at. But you will be able to identify, um, if you have received feedback in certain projects, like which were the aspects that you had, which were the skills that you had applied for that particular project, and accordingly assign yourself one of those scores of beginner, intermediate, or advanced kind of a skill set. right? So that's how you identify your core skills. We have not necessarily, done a prioritization or some sort of a sequencing of these skills deliberately, so because it becomes sometimes overly precise, and people don't always have that level of precision. Meaning they don't always know that, okay, these are the skills that I'm at a beginner level or intermediate or advanced. So I think what you can do is, if you're utilizing this framework, just sequence it in a way where you're putting the most important or most strong skills that you have at the beginning, and then you are sequencing the intermediate ones, and then your introductory or your beginner level skills. So the three ways I just want to quickly repeat are: number one, you think about where you have spent most time in the last 5 years applying which skills. Number two, you want to think about where you have driven the greatest impact on projects objectively, right? Meaning you have achieved the goals or overachieved the goals consistently. And third is the type of feedback that you have received from peers and manager and clients, right? There may be other ways. Like I said, you can take assessment if you like. You can probably also just do more of a self assessment, kind of rating yourself on all the different skills. But I think the three methods that we have shared typically give you a very unbiased and objective way to rate your own skills. So that's the second thing we are doing, is identifying our current standing in the market, right? Now, the third exercise here in skill gap is finally knowing what are the skills we have versus the ones that are required, right? So you'll see for each of the roles that you've shortlisted here, what are your current key skills and what are your current required skills, right? That will help us make sure that we are looking at collectively all the skill requirements, but focusing more on the required ones. And then these are the ones that you want to particularly focus on, right? Now in this, typically what we do is, at this stage, we ask our clients, our users, to get feedback from industry experts who are working in their target role, right? So if you're working in talent development or digital marketing, you schedule sessions with our industry experts. So I'll just show that to you for a quick second here. So you'll see this feature over here, which is industry mentors, right? Now, once you click on that, you'll see that we have over 500 industry experts over here. Some of them don't have a profile listed here because of confidentiality reasons, but many of them already have shared their profiles, right? So you can try and schedule a session with anybody from your field. All the different fields are shown up here. For example, if you're looking for marketing, you can click on marketing and click on that person's profile, and then you can schedule a session with them. There will be a book a session CTA, call to action. You can click on that and then book your session, right? You can also read more about each person's background, expertise, what they have been helpful with other clients, and then make your decision whether you want to book a session. Obviously, each session has a certain consultation rate which you will have to pay for. But personally, I mean, I'm biased, but I would say there's a lot of value in getting these one-on-one feedback from experts who are not just experts from a subject matter perspective, but many times they have hiring expertise as well, meaning they have made hiring decisions. So you want to be able to get that kind of feedback from people who have both subject matter expertise as well as hiring expertise. Now let's go back to the career planner over here. And I see that some of you have been sharing your background, your questions in the chat. So thanks for doing that. We will um, take those up very shortly. Okay. Okay. Not sure. Give me 1 second. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So, yes, we had just completed the skill gap exercise. Now we were on the call with industry mentor. So, this is where I had suggested that you schedule a session with an industry expert, right? From people who are working in your target field. You can click on the profiles here, or you can go to all mentors and book a session. Now, once that is done, we'll move on. Now, the next thing is understanding what type of courses would be best for you for upskilling, right? So this is something again that it is not the easiest decision today, like I mentioned earlier, because there are a plethora of courses out there, and you can choose from many different types of courses: short format, long format, self-paced, instructor-led, something that's free versus paid, something that is live versus recorded, right? So there are a lot of different types of factors that go into defining whether the course is the right fit for you or not. So we have, I mean, there are all these different factors, but the main ones which we see time and again as the deciding factors for people how they want to pick a course is whether they want to do a self-paced course or a cohort based. So self-paced is kind of recorded and you can do it at your own leisure whenever you are available. Cohort based is when you want to do something live with other peers as well who are taking that course besides you. And same thing for duration, right? So duration is something that we have seen determines the level of fluency a lot of times, because obviously the more time you spend upskilling in something, the deeper you go into it and the higher your expertise. So those are the two factors. Right now, based on whatever we had previously seen in the last exercise of what kind of skills we have, what kind of skills we lack, what are the gaps. So based on that, there are going to be certain recommendations that come up automatically over here. So for example, you can see there are certain HR related courses, there are certain marketing oriented courses, right? And there are certain analytics also. Analytics is probably because in certain roles, analytics is kind of like a horizontal skill, like HR analytics, people analytics, or marketing analytics. So that's why we are also recommending tangential skills, which may not be role specific always, but they're good to have because they're going to help you secure a better role, right? Or help you get a advancement in your career. So that's why we are showing these shortlisted roles. Now, obviously, you can read more for any of these roles to see which ones make more sense. You can also see more courses over here. But let's take a look, right? So let's say we are focusing on the first course. So when you go there, you will see, okay, this is a free course, it seems like, and it is online, self-paced. You can check out all the information related to this course over here, right? So what we'll learn, the curriculum, instructors are not shown for this one, perhaps it's not disclosed. What are the benefits, how do you enroll, right? And you can see some of the other details over here as well. This is an online certification based course. It's in English, it's a beginner level, and there are almost 28,000 plus learners for this particular course, right? So yeah, if you want to enroll, you can click on this. You can also look at some of the other courses that we mentioned, right? So these are different courses that are going to automatically be generated based on the skills that are gap areas for you, right? And there's a lot that goes in the back end in determining whether the course is the right fit, apart from these filters as well, right? But you can, like I said, you can see more courses if needed. You can scroll down and check out whether there are other courses which make more sense for you, right? Now we want to move on from this to start thinking about how we are going to track our courses, right? And that is through this upskilling tracker, wherein you can, once you shortlist a course, it will show up over here, right? And you can then look at each of those courses, right? And you can start a course if it's already if it's not started yet. You can also, once you start a course, you will see there's certain information that you will be filling out over there. So for each of those courses, you will be able to edit it. So for example, you go here, You'll put the expected completion date, how much is already done, and you can update it, right? That's it. So then it will show where you are today, and when you are expected to be completing this particular course. So this is just a high level tracker. Obviously, it gives you just timelines on when do you expect to be completed with that particular course. But apart from that, I think the next thing that I would say is important here is also doing certain projects, right? So that is something that you should discuss with the industry mentors, as we had mentioned earlier. um, when you are connecting with them to understand what kind of skill gaps you have, which ones you should be focusing on bridging, what are the best ways to upskill through a course or through a project, you want to get their feedback specifically on what kind of project you can work on. So a lot of these experts have deep experience in the field, which means they know exactly what kind of practical level skills are companies expecting from you, what kind of tools they want you to use, what kind of different types of AI models that have been developed, whether for workflow optimization or quality improvements. So you want to be able to get that feedback from an expert in your field. And once you get the feedback, you will also ask them about the project requirements, meaning what are the key criteria for project effectiveness, meaning is it going to be certain metrics that I should be driving through this project? Should it be certain type of outcomes that we are trying to achieve? So what is the best way to evaluate project effectiveness, and based on that you develop a custom project. Now you might ask, okay, how should I develop a custom project? Number one is, again, get that feedback from industry experts. A lot of them have helped many of our users to be able to develop these projects. But at the same time, generally what we have found as a pattern is, for each role, whether it's product management, data analytics, marketing, HR, finance, supply chain, strategy ops, all of these different roles, and certain others like engineering, etc., we have seen that it's possible to do a project, right, for most of these roles. Maybe in very, very few roles, like sometimes we see sales or customer success roles, it's harder to do a project because you need to engage with a client, right? And based on that engagement, you are able to complete the project. So for those, you might only be able to do an internship or a real world scenario where you are, let's say, working with a startup or volunteering your time on the side with a company. So those are the type of situations you can create for yourself to do a project in sales and customer success oriented roles. If you are not in a sales or customer success oriented role, typically you will find an avenue to build that project. So for example, for a lot of data analytics, data science professionals, we know there are platforms like Kaggle that can help you. Obviously, for product management, there are hundreds of platforms today that help you build MVPs, right? For marketing also, there are certain platforms out there which are, GTM platforms, growth marketing oriented platforms, that can help you get a flavor of, what kind of projects are currently trending in the job market, which companies are looking for experience in when they make hiring decisions, right? So there are different platforms. If you're not aware, talk to an industry expert. They will help you identify the right platforms. And many times what happens is you do a custom project as well with these industry experts, where the the project stipulations or the factors that determine how you're supposed to work on a specific project, those will be shared with you by the experts, and they will supervise you as you complete that project, right? So they'll give you a situation, they'll give you sort of a process at a high level, that then you will execute on that process. Wherever you are stumbling or you're not sure how to proceed, you can get feedback and make sure that the end result is something that you can actually demonstrate to your prospective employers in the job market, right? So yeah, these are some of the key things that we would be taking up today, um, from a skill acquisition perspective. And I think we have covered most of the key points here. The last thing that I want to highlight here is, we have something which we had talked about at the beginning of this session as well, which is, ensuring that you're focused on the most in demand skills, and you're also focusing on skills where you have certain gaps. So that brings a lot of personalization. So definitely make sure when you are doing these exercises, you're starting not just by signing up for a course, because we have seen sometimes people do that. They go straight forward for a course, right? So they go straight to this upskilling plan and then they start taking up a course. But I just want to reiterate and emphasize the importance of doing the skill gap analysis, wherein you look at the in demand skills from our perspective, from Pivot's perspective, as well as the job description analysis. Then you also look into your own skills, identify which are the strong ones versus intermediate or to the company requirements, identify the gaps, and then come up with the personalized upskilling plan based on the industry experts' feedback. All right, so I hope that was helpful. I will stop sharing my screen and take up some of the questions that have come up in the chat here. All right, so I'm seeing certain comments here. Gitanjali, thanks for joining in. I know we have spoken once earlier, so good to see you here. And then I think we have Manoj. Manoj, good to see you. I think you have a question here. So you have experience in project management, operations, ONG, and tried several courses on data analysis, digital marketing to check out which career opportunity is best. That's the reason. Okay. Yeah, one good point here, Manoj, actually is, you're looking at data analysis and digital marketing as two different type of career options potentially. Now, typically, you don't necessarily need to take courses to determine whether you should go into data analysis or you should go into digital marketing. Like I had mentioned earlier, in our platform on Pivot, when you go into the career planner, the first module that actually focuses, that's a focus area for our users, is not the skills one. It is actually explore module, which focuses on helping you identify with a high level of clarity and confidence which role and industries are the best fit for you. So I would highly recommend taking a look at that module. If you need more instructions on how to work on that module, like I said earlier, you can check out a YouTube video on this particular topic. It will help you understand how to make the most of that particular module, right? But in most cases, like, I would not recommend taking an entire course to be able to figure out whether you should go down that particular career path or not. Only in some cases it might be necessary, right? And one thing that helps you understand whether you need to take a course or not is whether you have been able to gather the key information you need to make a an informed and balanced decision around your career path. So you will see, like, there are 4 or 5 different exercises that we have mentioned in the first module. When you go through those exercises, you likely will be able to gather all the information. In case you're still not able to gather all the information that you need to make your decision, in that case, you can consider a short course which gives you a flavor of that particular field or skill set, right? So I think that will help you decide which role to target. I hope that makes sense. And then we can move on. Um, okay, we have Lava Kumar. Thanks, Lava, for joining. Then again, I think we have another question from Manoj, so I'll take this one up as well. So two issues crossed, Manoj. How to identify which career field is correct to pivot for showing transferable skills to high paying career and not to start from fresher level. And second question is, courses and certifications are everywhere to learn, but how to show your enthusiasm to companies as we know the skill, or if there's any lacking, we can learn them on the job. It's just iterating them on resume that we know the skill by showing certification 8 years and then to learn that there is the experience barrier, how to break this. Okay. Yeah. Good questions. I think it's more job search centric kind of a question. So I think I'll take up both of them. So first is the one where you said, which field is correct to pivot to and showing transferable skills. So, like I said, I think, you should, Manoj, definitely check out the first module. It will 100% help you figure out the answer to this question as to which field you should be targeting and where you have transferable skills as well, right? Typically, I'll just give you a high level framework for how that particular module works. So it looks into two types of parameters: internal parameters that are specific to you and external parameters that are specific to the job market. So internal parameters are things like your core skills and achievements, your interest areas, what you enjoy working on, what are your key priorities at this stage in your career, meaning the things that you find non-negotiable at this stage in your career, and also your overarching background and long-term goals. So that is what we take into account for the internal parameters. Then we look at external parameters related to the job market, meaning what's the kind of hiring activity that we are seeing in the ecosystems that you are targeting. For example, if you're targeting talent development and marketing, what kind of hiring activity are we seeing? What is the hiring criteria, skill requirements for those roles, and what are the future prospects for these roles as well? So we look into all of these external parameters. Once we have these two, then we compare the internal versus external parameters to identify where do we have the biggest alignment areas, where do we have the biggest gaps. Usually, where the alignment areas are, we call that the zone of alignment. So, in that zone of alignment, you will see certain areas where there's very high level of alignment between internal external parameters and some with lower, right? So, we want to be able to identify the alignment, and based on that we put down our anchor point to say that this is where our next role should be, because that will help you match your overarching ambition with achievability in the job market. We can't, when we talk about ambition and achievability, we have to balance those two. If we aim too high, we are likely not going to hear back from companies. If we aim too low, we are not going to be satisfied or paid well enough in a career. So you have to find that zone of alignment, and that's what we look at in the first module. So that's the first question. I think the second question that you have is, in case you're lacking certain skills, can we show our enthusiasm to companies, especially when we are applying to jobs? Because a lot of times you would acquire that skill on the job, not necessarily, before having that job. So yeah, I mean, this is a very relevant question, right? We get this all the time, because many times when people are shifting their careers, going from one field to another, they find that they have certain overlaps and they have certain gaps. So how do you compete with other candidates who are not shifting careers, right? And companies are looking at their profile over yours. Or if they're looking at your profile, then they're thinking about you as a fresher or somebody who's starting from scratch. So, very valid question, very practical question. Now, typically, we want to first make sure that we are not going into a role where we have zero skills, especially on the must have skill requirements. So, for example, there are a lot of people who are in sales who don't want to always be in sales and they want to transition because of various reasons. And if they're transitioning, there are certain roles where we have generally seen overlaps or transferable skills. Not 100%, but maybe at least 40-50% kind of transferability of skill set. So, for example, customer success, account management, pre-sales, marketing, right? There are certain other roles as well, sometimes even product management, but these roles will have certain overlaps. But if I suddenly ask a salesperson to do, you know, um, data science and AI/ML, obviously there's going to be very limited overlap. So you need to decide which role makes more sense for you. The ones where there are overlaps, obviously it's much more achievable, right? And the ones where are less overlaps, that's less achievable. That's obvious. But how do you make sure that you have maximize your chances of landing the role? So this is how. Wherever you have transferable skills, like let's say you have been in sales and you're trying to transition to customer success. Now you might have done a lot of your new sales of new logos, which is typically called hunting. Hunting means you are getting new clients, and then you might have also done farming. Farming is when you are getting more revenues from the existing clients. So customer success typically focuses on farming, right? That is where the bigger overlap is with the sales role. So in such scenario, you want to highlight the kind of farming oriented achievements or skill set that you bring to the table as opposed to the hunting ones, right? Hunting one will not necessarily overlap significantly with a customer success role, but farming will. So, first point is, how do you emphasize your capabilities, your achievements in the overlapping areas? In this case, where you have been able to drive greater revenues from existing clients, right? And that will have a whole host of skill requirements on particularly that area. So, you identify those and you emphasize those across your resume, LinkedIn, any networking outreach that you're doing, interview preparation, everywhere. You need to highlight that. Secondly, it's about the gaps. So let's say in customer success, there is a lot of focus apart from extracting the most revenue from your existing clients. Maybe there is a lot of focus on gathering client feedback and making sure that they are satisfied with the existing product that you are selling to them, right? So essentially, customer retention, customer advocacy, customer satisfaction, NPS, this is perhaps new for a sales professional. They may not have done this in a in-depth manner in their prior role. So these are the gap areas where you don't have a lot of skills. You can only do two things here. One is you try and bridge that gap to the extent possible by upskilling, right? If there are certain courses that help you acquire those skills, if you can have industry expert mentorship sessions where you get feedback from somebody who's working in your target role and you get concept clarity, doubt clarity sessions with them, I think those can be really helpful. If you can do certain projects in your target role and target skill requirements, I think that can be very, very helpful. So this is all related to upskilling, right? Either you can do a course, you can do a project, you can do one-on-one sessions with experts from concept clarity standpoint. The other thing that you can do is you don't emphasize those skills in your job applications, meaning you don't need to call out that, hey, I have not done those, when you're applying in any form of fashion. Rather, you either do something specifically for your target company in that area, meaning build a custom project for that particular company if possible, right? So again, if it is something, let's say in the project related to maximizing client satisfaction rate for customer success role. So how would you do that? What are the strategies you would apply? Give us a case scenario where let's say a client is unhappy because the product didn't function as expected, and now you're trying to basically retain the client, make sure they don't go to a competitor, and at the same time you increase their overall CSAT or client satisfaction score, right? So how would you tackle such a problem? Now you may not have done this in your prior career, but you can try and give it a stab in a custom project that's targeted for your prospective employer. So understand the prospective employers, what product or service they are selling, who's their customer, what kind of problem could come up in such relationships with your clients, and how would you then solve for it. I think showcasing what you're capable of, even if you have not done it previously, gives people some confidence that, hey, at least this person is trying, they are serious, they are committed, they are not completely just ignoring that skill requirement, right? So yeah, I think if you can build some sort of a custom project, in some cases it may not be possible, but other times it can. So I think that is really, really helpful. So these are the two main things, right? Highlighting the transferable skills and showcasing your capability on the gap areas. Apart from that, the only other thing is you hope that the skills that you don't have experience in, that the company will not penalize you significantly, and there won't be a lot of other candidates who bring all of the skills to the table. Obviously that's a very, very unlikely scenario. It's a risky scenario. I would say probably in less than 20% of the cases would something like that happen, because most companies would want to hire somebody who brings all the key skills, right? But yeah, at the same time, if there are just two or three skills out of, let's say, 10 requirements, or there are only two or three skills which you don't bring to the table, that's absolutely okay, right? There are a lot of times people get hired because they bring like 6 or 7 out of 10 skills in a very, very strong manner. They have really good experience, in-depth expertise and achievements in those 6 or 7 areas, so they get hired for those. and the company knows that, okay, the other 2 3 areas, they are gaps, but they are not hiring you for that, and they know they can that you can bridge those gaps on the job as well, right? So yeah, typically that's how I would structure this kind of framework based approach on highlighting your overlapping skills, bridging the key gap areas, and then for the rest, make sure you are articulating during interviews or through other methods that you are mindful of the gap areas, and you will be looking forward to um, upskilling yourself on the job once you get that opportunity. All right, I think that's it for today, folks. Thank you for joining in. I hope this session provided some, practical insights that you can apply right away to identify the right skills that you need for your target role, understand where you stand today versus the skill requirements, and then ultimately have a personalized upskilling plan that helps you mitigate those gaps and be able to land your target role effectively. Feel free to check out our platform as I have shared with you in the course of this session. It's mypivot.work. In case you're looking for any personalized feedback, you can book a one on one session with industry experts in your target role. If you just want to know how the platform works, how it can potentially help you in your transition journey, not just on the upskilling pointers, but on other aspects like clarity on the target role and positioning, optimizing your job application, practicing for interviews, or just getting more referrals and more interview opportunities in the market. So for all of this, you can check out our platform, and you can also book a one-on-one session with our team to understand how this platform can help you. All right. Thank you so much for joining today, and I hope you all